Conor McGregor just called his shot. He went on record, looked directly at the lightweight division, and said, "I'm here to take what is mine. Not to compete. Not to test himself. To take." And the entire MMA world is now split down the middle about whether that confidence is justified or whether Max Holloway is about to make the most anticipated comeback in UFC history look very short and very painful. Let's build this from the ground up. Because the McGregor versus Holloway conversation is not simple. It is not a clean favorite and a clean underdog story. It is a genuinely complicated matchup between two fighters whose specific strengths and specific vulnerabilities collide in ways that reasonable, experienced people are reading completely differently. And the disagreements are not casual. They are fundamental. Start with the weight. McGregor wanted this fight at 170 pounds. He was direct about why. He watched Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira starve themselves for the BMF title at 155 and decided that was not the version of this fight he wanted any part of. His words were blunt. There is nothing BMF about being the baddest man in a sauna. He is a big man. 170 is his frame. He feels stronger there, more natural, more himself. And when you hear that explanation in full, it is hard to argue with the logic on its surface. But Teddy Atlas heard that same explanation and read it as a confession. Atlas said directly, "The fact that McGregor is fighting at 170 tells you exactly where he is physically right now. A man who spent years competing at 145 and 155 does not move to 170 because he prefers it. He moves there because the body he is carrying after 4+ years of living outside the strict demands of elite athletic preparation cannot get back to where it used to be." That is not a criticism dressed as analysis. That is Atlas reading the competitive evidence and telling you what it means. McGregor cannot make the weight he used to make. Not even close. And the weight class he is fighting at is the evidence. Max Holloway heard the 170 announcement and did not flinch for a single second. Any weight. Any place. Any time. He said it with the kind of casual certainty that comes from a man who genuinely does not care about the number on the scale because his advantages have nothing to do with weight. Real BMF fighters do not walk around with scales. He is a fighter. That is what he does. And while that framing sounds like promotional bravado, the competitive reality underneath it is sound. Holloway's endurance, his volume, his ability to impose a pace that breaks fighters down over 5 rounds, none of those qualities change meaningfully between weight classes. Here is the core tension that every serious analyst keeps returning to. McGregor's power is real and it is not diminished by inactivity. Dustin Poirier said it, Michael Bisping said it, Matt Brown said it, the left hand is still the left hand. At 170 pounds, carrying natural weight without a brutal cut, that power gets amplified by the size he is bringing to the cage. Teddy Atlas noted that McGregor will likely be significantly bigger than Holloway at this weight, not just in terms of the scale, but in terms of physical presence, strength, and the ability to generate force. One clean shot from a bigger, stronger McGregor landing on Holloway's chin changes everything about how this fight plays out. That is not a fantasy. That is a legitimate competitive pathway that the people who have studied both fighters are taking seriously. But the pathway that goes the other direction is equally legitimate and arguably more probable based on the available evidence. Chris Weidman said it most precisely. No amount of training fully replaces the comfort of being in there. After an absence this long, McGregor was already uncomfortable enough inside the cage to show cardio problems in previous fights, before the layoff, before the injury, before the years away. Weidman's argument is that those problems do not get fixed by a training camp, no matter how rigorous. They get exposed by a fighter who applies pressure from the opening bell and never lets it up. Max Holloway is that fighter. Jorge Masvidal broke down the Holloway game plan in terms that make it feel almost inevitable if the fight reaches the later rounds. Holloway knows his greatest weapon is his gas tank. He also knows McGregor's greatest vulnerability is exactly the same thing. The strategy writes itself. Take the first round to measure, to establish the jab, to let McGregor feel like the early pressure is manageable. Then turn the volume up in rounds 2 and 3. And by rounds 4 and 5, if McGregor is still standing, the fight becomes a fundamentally different contest than the one McGregor's power is designed to win. Dustin Poirier raised a specific concern that nobody else in this conversation addressed as directly. He suggested McGregor might try to wrestle in this fight, to use positional control as a way to neutralize Holloway's striking volume. And Poirier dismissed that approach immediately. McGregor is not that kind of wrestler. He does not have the gas tank to survive scrambles, to work for takedowns that do not materialize, to fight through the physical cost of grappling exchanges at 170 pounds against a man who has been training those exact situations continuously. If McGregor commits to a wrestling-heavy strategy and it does not produce results in the early rounds, the energy debt he accumulates will make the later rounds nearly unwinnable. Arman Tsarukyan offered the most divided take in the entire conversation. He said stylistically it is a good fight for McGregor. He said Holloway looks done. He said he gives McGregor the edge. And then in a separate conversation he said he does not actually think McGregor can beat Holloway because the inactivity is too significant and the preparation is too uncertain. But if the odds make McGregor the underdog, he would bet on McGregor. That is not a contradiction. That is the honest calculation of a professional fighter who understands that in combat sports, the underdog price sometimes reflects a misreading of how dangerous a specific type of fighter is in a specific type of matchup. The counterpunching left hand of a motivated McGregor, even a McGregor coming off a 5-year absence, carries enough one-punch finishing power to justify a bet at underdog odds. Israel Adesanya stepped back from the McGregor versus Holloway debate entirely and framed what he sees as the real commercial story emerging from the lightweight division right now. He said Gaethje sitting ringside at the McGregor versus Holloway fight, as the new champion watching two former contenders battle for relevance and a title shot, is already a story that writes itself. And he went further. He said a Gaethje versus McGregor fight would feed families. Would feed countries. That is not hyperbole from Adesanya. That is a man with significant commercial experience in this sport recognizing that if McGregor wins on July 11th, the fight that follows it against the man who just knocked out Ilia Topuria on the south lawn of the White House is the biggest commercial event the sport has produced since McGregor's own prime. Demetrius Johnson sees all of that potential and argues it is irrelevant to the most important decision Gaethje can make right now. Johnson's position is clean and unambiguous. There is nothing left for Gaethje to do. World Series of Fighting Champion. Interim Champion. Undisputed Champion. 17 bonuses. The biggest win in the biggest event in UFC history. Johnson says the smartest call Gaethje makes is to walk away on his own terms, protect his brain, and let the legacy stand as it is. If Gaethje takes that advice, the rematch Topuria is demanding does not happen, the McGregor fight does not happen, and the entire conversation about what comes next becomes a conversation about who fills the space that Gaethje leaves behind. That is the variable that nobody in the lightweight division has a clean answer to. But all of that is contingent on what happens on July 11th. Because the division does not reorganize itself around McGregor unless McGregor wins. The commercial potential, the Gaethje rematch, the title conversation, the return of the biggest name the sport has ever produced, all of it requires McGregor to walk through the cage, survive the early rounds, find the timing on the left hand, and finish the most consistently active elite fighter in the weight class against an opponent who has been competing at this level without interruption for the entire duration of McGregor's absence. The betting market has Holloway as a significant favorite. -330. McGregor at +270. The professional assessors of competitive probability are not impressed by star power or ticket prices or the narrative value of the comeback. They are reading the competitive evidence. 5 years out, 170 pounds, coming back against a man who just fought Charles Oliveira in 2026, fought Dustin Poirier in 2025, fought Ilia Topuria in 2024. The gap in recent competitive experience is the size of a career. And the market is pricing that gap honestly. But here is what the market cannot price. The specific danger of a motivated McGregor in the early rounds with fresh legs, natural weight, and the left hand that has ended careers. The market cannot quantify what happens in the first 60 seconds if McGregor finds the timing. The market cannot model the psychological variable of a man fighting with everything on the line after 5 years away on a stage that is selling tickets at $45,000. The market prices probability. It does not price the specific chaos that a particular type of striker introduces into a fight regardless of the surrounding circumstances. That is why the conversation is this divided. That is why experienced fighters and analysts who have studied both men are landing in completely different places. That is why July 11th is not a foregone conclusion in either direction, regardless of what the odds say or what the recent competitive history suggest. McGregor said he is here to take what is mine. Holloway said any weight, any place, any time. Both of them mean it. And on July 11th in Las Vegas, one of them is going to be right. The entire sport is going to be watching to find out which one.